Hello, everybody, and welcome again to the Nassar 17 channel. We are so blessed to have Gary Wayne with us today, and we've been working on this for a long time, and I've been listening to a lot of I started reading his book. It's a big one, but I've been listening to your podcast for, shoot, I don't know, probably at least 5, 6 years now, and the information was just amazing, revelatory. You tie, I feel like you take the Christian perspective and you tie in so many other things that are related, but we didn't realize they were related. So it's such a blessing to have you on today.
Well, thank you for inviting me to your show, and so happy to be here and to talk to your audience. One of the things that I like to say that now that I've written book two, one of the differences between book one and book two is that book one is written from a distinct Christian biases, but it is using testimony from all cultures and all religions around the world to let them speak for themselves. And it's kind of how the Bible ties into the world testimony about the same prehistory and the same history and the same prophetic end time, although different outcome, and look through a polytheist lens versus a monotheist lens. So book one is more directed specifically at Christians and goes deeper into the Bible than I think any other book that's out there. And I think it's
And
absolutely
what's the name of
um,
book one for the
book
audience?
book one. Book one is the Genesis 6 conspiracy, how secret societies and the descendants of giants plan to enslave humankind. And book two is the Genesis 6 conspiracy, part two, how understanding prehistory and giants helps to define end time prophecy. And so book two, it uses a biblical chronology versus the secular chronology. And it shows how some of the world testimony ties in with the Bible, but it is everything specifically from a Bible perspective. And as I say, I think it is essential reading for Christians to understand, particularly the Old Testament, but the Bible as a whole, because those first 3 or 4 sections in book two for Christians, believe me, it is eye-opening as book one is, but for a different reason. Book one is eye-opening because it opens up areas that people haven't realized are important to understand. And it's talking about the world that we live in and who rules this earth. And then book two is more about the response from God Most High. So there are two different perspectives. If you don't have to read book one to read book two, and vice versa, they're independent. There's a little bit of overlap, but it presents more information and new information on either side. But if you're not a Christian, or if you're not, as a Christian, used to reading things in the Bible, you might want to start with book one. But if you are a Christian that studies the Bible, you could start with book two, and you might find it very, very helpful. And then that's going to want to make you read book one, because some of the things that are referencing, I'm going to cover in great detail in book one.
Yeah, I had, in the truther realm or the Christian realm, when we get to studying things and so forth, I was thinking about this the other day. I mean, of course, you're a little bit older than myself, so you've had more actual time to research. But once you start reading the Bible, like what would you recommend? Obviously, we recommend reading your book, but what path would you kind of recommend for people to go down when they start researching for themselves?
Well, I think you have to understand what you're researching and why you're researching. My advice would be is to learn as much as you can, but measure everything against what you're researching outside the Bible, against what is inside the Bible. And if you find things that are different, then you might want to note that as interesting, but don't rely on it for your basis of forming an opinion or a statement. But things that may add additional detail on things that are talked about in the Bible, you may want to look at that a little bit closer for a larger context. So I think it would be important for Christians to understand why we're told that we live in a world that we are not really meant to be of, and that our proper home is in heaven, and that this world, for a temporary period, is run by the invisible ones, and physically run by the visible ones, which are their spirits, offspring, and followers. And they control this whole earth between the council of the gods and the hierarchy of the council of the gods that sit over the 70 nations, both before and after the flood, and they control everything. And so you only have small pockets that you have coming out of prehistory and history of monotheism, and yet it still stands. And so it's in direct opposition to this world. And our experience is kind of helping convict those invisible ones and then their spirits, offspring, and followers.
And did you read through the whole Bible? Did you start with like books like the Book of Enoch, or like did you start
No,
with?
no, I wasn't even familiar with the Book of Enoch when I started doing my research. So I was about 20 or 21, and I had a challenge drinking beers on a Friday night with my brother and a friend. And so late into the evening, they start talking about Antichrist and false prophet. And, me and my brother, we grew up in a Baptist church. And so we were familiar with the term. I was familiar with the terms, but not really familiar. And I had seen the movies in the 70s about Damien and things like that. But then they came and said, if you've got enough courage, we'd like you to read this book. And I thought they must be probably referring to the Bible. And it wasn't. It was a book by a prolific writer of prophecy named Hal Lindsey, and it was called The Late Great Planet Earth. And Hal's still alive today and still working today, as I understand it, which is an amazing thing. Um, and so I read the book, and it scared the socks off of me. So I'm a Christian, and I'm a contrarian, and now I'm a Christian contrarian. And I thought, if even part of what he says is true, I better know more about this. And I want to verify whether or not, as a contrarian, because I like to verify everything for myself, whether or not he was quoting the Bible accurately, and did it stand up with what the rest of the Bible said. And even though I had kind of an understanding of the Bible, I had, not nearly enough knowledge to take this on. So I thought the only way I can start this is I started to read the Bible. And then it was really tough reading through the Old Testament, and which is why so many people love my writings, because it makes the whole Testament come to life for them.
It
And I
does.
understand it. It's yeah, because there's so much information in the Old Testament. It's quite dry unless you know the context to it. But by the time I got to the four Gospels leading off the New Testament and finished those, I was smitten by the words that this could not be human words that Jesus spoke. And so after I read the Bible, I thought, well, the only way I can really get at this is I have to start, researching the Bible in terms of copying down and making notes and files on all the different prophecy paths. Because I had realized there was different things going on in prophecy, and even though I missed a bunch of it and didn't understand, some of it was prophecy. And so I started to log it down by highlighting a Bible, and I ran out of colors pretty fast. So then I had to restart and write that down and go through the Bible many times to try and get all of those different prophecy narratives so that I could see how they could come together. So then I spent, years just putting that together and finding more and adding to it. And by about 1996 or so, I thought, I might have possibilities of writing several books here.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I didn't have a platform. I'm not a minister. I've not gone to seminary school. And I'm going, well, I don't even know whether I can write a book or not. And I don't have a university education. So I thought, well, maybe I could try and write a short book, A, to see whether I could write a book, and B, would it be published? And then if it was published, would anybody buy it? And then if anybody bought it, would they actually like it? You don't know any of
Yeah.
that going in. You have no idea what you're really getting into. And so I thought I would write a very short book,